so on. So let's just register that point. Thoughts or questions at the moment?
Would you suggest the same approach to Hebrew, or a practicing Jew that knows the Hebrew scriptures but is not a follower of Jesus when it comes to talking about who Jesus is?
I think so. The Hebrew scriptures are the heritage of now multiple religious traditions, so the Abrahamic traditions particularly. So Judaism first, chronologically, then Christianity as an offshoot, and then Islam. So these are three really influential world religions that all have some reference point to what the Hebrew scriptures are. But in each of those traditions, the meaning and significance of the Hebrew scriptures is very different. It's a different story, leading to a different fulfillment. So, but the pattern of what you see in the first generation of the Jesus movement is Messianic Jews going to their family and friends and saying, like, you guys, this is what it is actually about. So it's a contested claim. But it's a claim that I think is amply demonstrated when you see things from that point of view. This will come up more than once. The biblical literature, especially the Hebrew Bible, is intentionally written in a very dense way that leads you on a journey of deeper understanding. And so on any journey of understanding, you realize you're having you're developing your point of view, and your understanding changes over time. And so it's a kind of literature that doesn't bonk you over the head with its meaning. It asks you to give a lifetime of reflection onto what it might mean. And so that's a challenge that children's books they don't let anybody have that challenge. They just filter it out and just make it crystal clear. So we'll come back to that deeper question again and again as we talk about the story. Yeah. Other thoughts?
You've said it multiple times. When you look at Jonah, you're looking at this whole story of the scriptures. But beyond just it being embedded into the Old Testament scripture, you could make that case for any book in the Old Testament. Yeah. Are there specific things within the context of Jonah that you're making that claim?
Yeah. Yes, and we will look at them at length. We'll look at them at length. Yes. But maybe to just say it initially, and this is something I am in a new discovery mode over the last few years, is that the Hebrew scriptures are a really diverse collection of literature. But they have been coordinated so that they really are all about one basic thing and one basic storyline. And Jesus' thumb is on it right there. We humans are really screwed up. We need an appointed one who will be human on our behalf. The family that God called to raise up that appointed one ends up being just as human as the rest of humanity. And so that family has a very fraught and complicated relationship with the Creator, such that it leads them actually into death, and out of death, out the other side, so that they can fulfill the mission that God has called them to all along. That's what the Hebrew Bible is about. And when Jesus grew up on this, at some point, which is a moment we don't ever quite hear about, it dawns on him that it's ultimately going to be carried forward through him. I mean, just imagine that. You wake up with that thought one day, right? You have to imagine yourself into that space. But yeah, so that is the claim I'm making. And we'll see how the book of Jonah works. Yeah, thank you. It's good.
The scriptures we read brought my mind to Revelation 14, chapter 14. John says that he saw an angel flying in the midst of heaven, having the everlasting gospel to preach unto them that dwell on the earth, and to every nation and kindred and tongue and people, This everlasting gospel, I believe, is what essentially you're referring to. And I would be surprised if we came back to that chapter in Revelation. But he's absolutely right. We can make that case for every book, essentially, including the one that gives us the conclusion
Yes.
of all the others.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Yep, correct. That's a good, I like that image, an eternal gospel. The claim, based on that Bible study that Jesus had in that room, the reason why followers of Jesus have, throughout the centuries, kept the first 3/4 of their Bible. And it's a complicated relationship with the first 3/4 of the Bible. There's a lot of sex and violence and really difficult stuff that followers of Jesus have had a hard time to know. How does that fit into the bigger picture? But Orthodox, both in Jewish and Christian traditions, have always said we have to wrestle and honor the portrait of God and God's purposes that are here and in the Christian tradition, because they're about the one thing that here is called the eternal good news. It's about one thing. And it's precisely when we don't have a framework for what that one story is that we don't know what to do with a book like Jonah. Once you don't see how it plugs in, then it's just like, what is this here weird story about a guy and a fish? And then it's weird. He prays from a fish. It's like really beautiful poem from a fish's belly. That's strange. That's weird. Why should I care about that? It's just, and so, I don't know how to make sense of it, so let's drop out the prayer and drop out that stuff at the end about him being suicidal, because that'll disturb children. So let's just create you know what I mean? Let's rewrite the story as a nice moralistic tale, because that's what religion is for, after all, is to make people good, right? So it's an honest struggle, but it's all a symptom of not knowing how to read these texts the way that Jesus read and understood them, and that he was trying to teach his followers. So in a way, it's a way of saying we need to recover why it is that these texts even matter to Jesus, why they matter to the movement of his followers, and why they have enduring relevance still for us today. Not just to give us narrative illustrations about how to be a good person, but they actually explain to us who Jesus is, and who we are, and who God is, and what on earth we're doing here. Yeah, thank you. An eternal, that's a good image. I'm going to keep that one. Thank you for that. Yes.
So when Jesus has the opportunity to summarize the Hebrew Bible in a sentence, he says that Messiah must suffer and rise from the dead on the third day. And I've been following Jesus for almost 23 years, and I've talked to a lot of Christians from a lot of different backgrounds. And when I hear them talk about the Hebrew Bible or the Old Testament and summarize it, that's not at all the answer I ever hear from anyone. It's about, in their minds, it's about laws and covenants and a lot of things that have been sort of made obsolete and don't really matter. And maybe it's still valuable as a proof texts and prophecies that sort of validate the claims of Jesus. But that's not the story. And that's why I think what you said, that Jonah is a sort of a microcosm of the larger problem with the Hebrew Scriptures, is that we have kind of filtered out what Jesus thinks is most important, actually, about the story.
That's right. It's one of the strangest ironies of the history of the Jesus movement, is we've lost touch with. That's being maybe too dramatic, but maybe not. Many Christian traditions simply don't know what to do with the first 3/4 of the Bible. And I think it's because we don't understand or take seriously what Jesus was saying, that this is actually what it's about. There was a portrait being painted in the Hebrew Scriptures that creates just a gigantic silhouette with a detailed job description, waiting for somebody to come do that thing. And what Jesus is doing when he quotes Isaiah 61 is saying, here it is. He's not saying like, okay, surprise, whole new story, whole new deal. No one's ever heard this before, but just trust me. It's like, no, everybody knows what needs to happen around here, and here we go. Now it starts. Yeah, thank you for that.